It's 1945, and the so-called Greater German Empire, the Nazi regime that once swept across Europe with promises of a 1,000-year Reich, is now crumbling. What happened? How did an empire powered by ambition, military might, and ruthless expansion end up destroyed within just a few years? Let's dive deep into the rise and fall of the Third Reich to understand the ambition, the arrogance, and the devastating consequences that led to the fall of the Greater German Empire. To understand Germany's ambitions, we need to go back to the late 1930s. Adolf Hitler's vision of a Greater German Empire, or Großdeutsches Reich, wasn't just a nationalist agenda, it was an ideology. Hitler and the Nazi leadership believed Germany was destined to dominate Europe. In their eyes, Germans were the master race, entitled to vast territory, particularly in the east. Hitler called it Lebensraum, or living space, aiming to expand Germany into Eastern Europe and Russia at the expense of millions of lives. Through propaganda, rallies, and speeches, Hitler sold his vision to the German public as a path to restore Germany's glory. He emphasized revenging the Treaty of Versailles, which many Germans saw as a national humiliation. The treaty had imposed severe financial and territorial restrictions on Germany after World War I, leading to economic hardship and social unrest. For many Germans, the Nazi promise of revival was irresistible, and Hitler's expansionist policies initially seemed to bring prosperity and unity. In 1939, Hitler's Germany made its first aggressive move, invading Poland. It was a ruthless campaign that took advantage of Germany's blitzkrieg, or lightning war, strategy, coordinated attacks with tanks, artillery, and air support designed to overwhelm enemies quickly. The world was shocked, and soon after, Britain and France declared war, marking the start of World War II. Poland fell within weeks, and soon the Nazi war machine set its sights on the rest of Europe. In just a few months, Denmark, Norway, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg were conquered. By June 1940, the Nazis had reached Paris, and France surrendered shortly after. At this point, Germany's power in Europe was unmatched, and Hitler was convinced he could take on any opponent. In Hitler's view, his empire was unstoppable, and the Third Reich appeared invincible, but cracks would soon start to show. As Germany continued its campaigns, Hitler made a series of critical strategic errors. Driven by ideology rather than practicality, he declared war on the Soviet Union in June 1941, hoping to crush communism and take the resources of Russia. Operation Barbarossa, as it was called, was the largest military operation in history at the time, with over 3 million German soldiers storming into the Soviet Union. At first, it was another victory. German troops were advancing fast, but they were woefully unprepared for what awaited them. The harsh Russian winter proved a cruel and unexpected enemy. German troops were equipped for quick victory, not for long, bitter winters with freezing temperatures and limited supplies. Stalled by cold, famine, and stiff Soviet resistance, the Germans began to suffer devastating losses. Hitler's refusal to retreat or reorganize cost countless lives. By the end of 1941, the Soviet Union had turned the tide, withstanding the Nazi onslaught and even launching counterattacks. On the Western Front, the Allies were preparing their own counteroffensive. On June 6, 1944, D-Day, over 156,000 Allied troops stormed the beaches of Normandy, marking the beginning of Germany's defensive downfall. Led by American, British, and Canadian forces, the Allies gained a foothold in Western Europe. Over the next year, they would liberate one city after another, eventually reaching Germany's borders. Back in Germany, the war was already taking its toll. The relentless bombing campaigns by the Allies had devastated German cities, industry, and infrastructure. Factories couldn't keep up with the demand for tanks, planes, and ammunition. Food and medical supplies were scarce, and many cities lay in ruins. German morale plummeted as more citizens faced the realities of the brutal Nazi regime. Meanwhile, on the Eastern Front, the Soviets were advancing with fierce determination. They liberated one Eastern European country after another, pushing the German forces back towards Berlin. The German soldiers, now exhausted and outnumbered, fought desperately but couldn't hold back the tide. By early 1945, Soviet forces were on the doorstep of Berlin itself. In April 1945, the Red Army breached Berlin. The end was near for the Nazis. German soldiers and citizens alike watched as their city was consumed by fire and chaos. Hitler himself, isolated and desperate, took refuge in his bunker beneath the Reich chancellery, giving erratic orders and clinging to the hope that reinforcements would arrive. But none came. On April 30th, 1945, Hitler committed suicide in his bunker. With Hitler's death, the German command knew it was over. On May 7, 1945, Germany officially surrendered to the Allies, marking the end of the Greater German Empire and, ultimately, the Nazi dream of domination. The surrender left behind a broken country, with countless casualties, devastated cities, and a global scar from the horrors inflicted by the Nazi regime. But the fall of the Third Reich wasn't just the end of a war. It was a global reckoning. The liberation of concentration camps revealed the depths of Nazi cruelty, bringing to light the unimaginable horrors inflicted on millions in the name of supremacy. The world looked on in shock, and the legacy of Nazi Germany served as a solemn reminder of the darkness that unchecked power and hatred can bring. In the aftermath, the Nuremberg trials sought to bring justice to those responsible for the atrocities. Survivors of the Holocaust and the war rebuilt their lives, but the memories remained, a lasting testament to the resilience of humanity, and a stark warning of the consequences of extremist ideologies. Today, Germany stands as a symbol of both the horrors of war and the potential for peace and reconciliation. The lessons of the Third Reich remind us of the dangers of nationalism and hate, and why it's essential to safeguard human rights and the values of democracy. The fall of Nazi Germany is more than a chapter in history. It's a story of resistance, endurance, and the human spirit's ability to overcome even the darkest of times.